I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, June 5th, 2018, and the Portland Board of Public Education is meeting at City Hall in Portland, Portland City Hall in Council Chambers. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Atkinson?
Here.
Ms. Seeliger?
Here.
Ms. Vendel? Ms. Davis?
Here.
Ms. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Morioni? Mr. Rodriguez?
Presente.
Mr. Balfons?
Here.
Ms. Clater? Here. Ms. Farah? Ms. Uri?
Here.
Ms. Power-Rakowski? And Chair Tavaro.
Here. And Ms. Morioni did let me know she is traveling this evening and won't be able to join us. Ms. Vendel has a work obligation and won't be joining us. And Ms. Powers-Rakowski is not feeling well this evening. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the report of the chair this evening, I just wanted to briefly report on two events that I was able to have the opportunity to attend over the last couple of weeks. The first was the Seal of Biliteracy, which was held on May 23rd at Portland High School. We awarded approximately 20 students with the Seal of Biliteracy, which is a medal for achieving mastery in 2 or more world languages. Shout out to Board Member Rodriguez, who was there, and to Tiana Uri, who was one of the additional 20 that we awarded with the certificate of completion. Those students completed their first year of a 2-year, and so they'll be completing their Seal of Biliteracy next year. At this event, I was asked to read the board's resolution that we passed just over a year ago that sort of launched this whole program and shows support on behalf of the board for biliteracy. And if you haven't had a chance to read that resolution, there's a lot of data in there and facts about the virtue that biliteracy brings to our school districts and helps in education, the economy, et cetera. So it's a great resolution. And it was really fulfilling to be able to see kind of the fruition of that work that we started a little over a year ago. And I wanted to say thanks to Grace Valenzuela for her work in putting that on, and to the educational staff who teach world languages, and all of our students. Once again, congratulations for achieving that award. I also was able to attend the PATHS graduation last Thursday, May 31st at Merrill Auditorium. Almost 200 students completed their program of choice. It was, I must say, an exceptional ceremony. There were performances in music and dance by the students, which were just great. We were impressed. We were almost on our feet dancing ourselves. And you could tell it was just a moment that really meant a lot to the students, so I was really proud to be a part of that. It's a great reminder of why we all do the work that we do, to be able to share in that experience. An announcement that our graduation's upcoming. We have tomorrow, Portland High School is at 10:30 a.m. at Merrill Auditorium. Deering High School is at 10:30 on Thursday at the Cross Insurance Arena. Casco Bay High School is on Thursday also at 6 p.m. at Merrill Auditorium. And Portland Adult Ed is on the 28th of this month, also at Merrill Auditorium. So we hope you'll be able to join us in all of those that you can. And that concludes the report of the chair. And we do not have a report of the students this evening.
Ms. Power-Rakowski is home ill, so we wish her a speedy recovery.
And moving into the report of the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We begin this week by honoring 2 outstanding Portland Public School students, Reagan Brown from Portland High School and Bilan Mohammed from Deering High School, who have been selected to participate in the Bank of America Student Leaders Program. Every year through the Student Leaders Programs, Bank of America helps connect 225 community-minded high school juniors and seniors to employment, skills development, and service. The program, which is new to us, is an 8-week internship and leadership conference program fully funded by Bank of America. This summer, there will be 230 students from 48 markets across the country participating, and they'll all be convening in Washington, D.C. together. Up until this year, the program had concentrated in large markets, the New Yorks, the DCs, the Chicagos. However, this year, for the first time ever, the Portland market has been designated as a student leader site. Bank of America looks for the next generation of community leaders, those with a passion for improving their community and turning that passion into action. Student leaders participate in an 8-week paid internship at a local nonprofit organization where they learn firsthand about the needs of the community and the critical role that nonprofits play. In addition, they learn valuable civic, social, and business leadership skills, and each student leader attends the Student Leader Summit held in Washington, D.C., where they get to explore how government, business, and the nonprofit sector work together to address critical community needs. Student Leaders is part of the Bank of America's ongoing commitment to preparing young people for a brighter future, and we are thrilled to have these two outstanding students be the first students from Maine to be selected for this program. Reagan Brown is a junior at Portland High School and will do her paid internship at United Way of Greater Portland. In a recommendation from Reagan's history teacher at Portland High School, Sally Regan, we learned that Reagan is among the most dedicated and meticulous students that I have encountered in my 25-year teaching career. She has a deep interest in politics, history, and the world around her. Bilan Mohammed is a junior at Deering High School. She will do her paid internship at the Boys and Girls Club. According to Deering High School Deering High School guidance counselor Libby Hesselton, quote, Bilan has a big smile and a bigger to-do list. Highly intelligent, mature, she is interested in everything and strives to understand all that she can. Congratulations to Reagan and Bilan. Also with Reagan tonight is her mother, Heather Smith, and with Bilan, her father, Deering High School Assistant Principal, Dr. Abdullahi Ahmed. We know that raising the next generation of leaders is teamwork, and nobody is a more important member of this team than the parents. So thank you both. I know that you must be proud of your students, and so are we. Reagan or Bilan, would you like to say anything? Go for it, Reagan. Come on up to the mic. And you have 3 minutes, just kidding.
I just want to thank the United Way, the Portland Public School System, and the Bank of America for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Great. A very special thanks to Bill Williamson, who's here, Bank of America president for the state of Maine. Bill advocated to provide this opportunity for Maine students. Bill is here along with Vice President and Maine Market Manager Rose Parsons, and I want to thank both of you for believing in the importance of supporting youth leadership and working hard to give students here in Portland and in all of Maine this opportunity. So thank you, Bill and Rose, and I don't know if you would like to say any words.
Thank you. I'm just going to be very brief, but first of all, I want to thank the superintendent and his team for all the collaboration and help to get this instituted here in Maine, and particularly in Portland. We didn't have a lot of time to do that, and your cooperation and your collaboration made it possible for us to do it so quickly this year, as well as the folks at Portland Public High School and at Deering. But I think the thing I really want to mention is as the applications came in and we were getting feedback from our team in Boston that manages this nationally, they highlighted the Portland applications and said they were some of the best they'd seen across the country. That's a compliment to the school system here in Portland, and I just want to highlight that because I think it's an important an important and distinguishing characteristic of what we experienced. So thank you all for making this possible, and I want to congratulate Reagan and Beeline for their accomplishment. I know they're going to have an exciting summer.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. The applications, I think, do justice to the amazing students in the Portland Public Schools, and I think we wouldn't be able to do that unless we had students of their caliber to be able to highlight. So, again, Bank of America is a great Portland Public Schools partner. Recently, the Portland Education Foundation received a $5,000 grant from Bank of America Foundation to support the PPS Families in Crisis Fund that has been developed to allow the school district to respond when families face unforeseen circumstances and immediate basic needs such as shelter, food, and transportation. When we look as a district at our attendance data, we know that homelessness and absences often go together, and so this fund is an effort to help us intervene to mitigate those circumstances so that we can keep our kids in school. So thank you to Bank of America for understanding and supporting that, and also thank you to Portland Education Foundation Director Kate Snyder for her work to develop and strengthen that partnership with Bank of America. So thank you, Kate, and all of the Portland Ed Foundation Board for your work on this. So thank you and congratulations, Reagan and Beeline. Also this week, we honor Portland High School sophomore Will Gordon. As many of you remember, a couple weeks ago, we all sat here and pulled out our cell phones and voted for Will as he competed in the Google's Doodle for Google competition. Will was one of 200,000 entries in the contest, which he won for the state of Maine. Google lavished him with gifts, a new Chromebook, a t-shirt with his doodle on it and a large replica of his doodle. And to win, he had to be the top vote getter in the high school category, competing against high school students from across the country. The winners were announced on Monday, and Will, unfortunately, did not win. Now, I personally think that the election was rigged because we're a small state, and there's no way that we could possibly compete with the Californias and Floridas and so on. But, you know, Will, we are exceedingly proud of you and very much look forward to seeing your work displayed in the future on a Google search headline, and more importantly, Will, you've got 2 more years to top this off, and I know that you absolutely will do that, so congratulations. Will, do you want to say anything?
So I just transferred to Portland High School from Cheverus this semester, and when I didn't enter the contest, I was a little afraid with the support, but with all the support from the board voting for me and just from the Portland School District in general, I don't think I could have done anything more for campaigning. Sorry, words are confusing. For campaigning to win this. So even if I didn't win, I very much appreciated all the support I got, and I hope to contribute more to the school district and to just the community in general in the future.
Absolutely, and we're so glad to have you. Okay, next, every school system in America needs interpreters to facilitate communication between non- or limited English-speaking parents of students and school system personnel. However, few educational institutions offer any formal training for this vital profession. To help fill this void, the University of Georgia developed a one-of-a-kind, highly acclaimed professional interpreter in education certificate program to increase professional knowledge, enhance career paths, and better serve non-English-speaking students and families in schools. Topics covered in the training include educational terminology, consecutive and simultaneous interpretation, cite and summarization translation, educational policies, personnel roles, and application of interpreters' standards of practice and code of ethics. Certificates are awarded to those who meet the course prerequisites for language proficiency, complete the program, and pass the final assessment. Parent community specialists at the multilingual and multicultural Multicultural Center participated in this one-of-a-kind program this winter and received a Professional Interpreter in Education certificate from the University of Georgia. Receiving this certificate are Rihab Altuma, Josephine Bizimana, Berthley Despacho, Shams Farah, Ahmed Jassim, Edward Laboke, Monique Mutuwinka, and Betsy Paz Jimensi. I can say that one. That one I should not mess up. So, and that's the one that I messed up. I messed up several of them, but. 3 other parent community specialists, Josephine Bizimana, Monique Mutumwinka, and Betsy Paz Jimensi. Jeez, what's with me?
You had a second shot.
And I blew it. Went on to complete the certificate course in Professional Interpreter in Special Education. This course prepares interpreters to navigate complex regulatory, ethical, and cultural issues involved in how school systems deliver special education services. Some of the topics covered included legislation and terminology of special education, roles in discussions of psychological evaluations, eligibility, individualized education plans, reevaluations, and post-high school transition. Congratulations to all of you for your dedication to your jobs and your commitment to grow in your skills and expertise. I'm continuously taken aback by the importance of the work that you do to create links to our community. Thank you so much for your service to Portland Public Schools, to our students, and to our families. Congratulations. Hand out certificates.
Yes.
Betsy? I can get positives.
It's that girl shoot
Yeah,
thing.
it's that other.
Thank
And
you.
Josephine. And Shamsa. Birthday. So congratulations to all of you. Well, we forgot. Sorry. And so that concludes our recognitions for now, but we have more important information. As Chair Terraro mentioned this week, students at Portland, Deering, and Casco Bay High Schools graduate. This is the culmination of their Portland Public Schools journey. Nearly 500 students will walk across the stages, prepared and empowered for their next educational journey. PHS graduates tomorrow at 10 o'clock at Merrill. Deering and Casco Bay students graduate at 10:30 and 6 p.m. respectively at Cross, Arena, and Merrill respectively. I think it's at 10, actually. 10:30, sorry, 10:30 for Portland High School tomorrow. For me, this is always the highlight of the year, to see our students walk across the stage, so I'm very much looking forward to it. I want to let you know that we're expecting responses to our Buildings for a Future Licensed Architect and Engineer RFP next week. Following that, a panel of staff and members of the BFOF Advisory Building Committee will be reviewing applications and selecting a firm to develop construction specifications. We're looking forward to having this important partner on board to help us get ready to break ground on the first construction project next spring. We have a number of large and small construction projects in the queue for this summer, including the Functional Life Skills class suite at Deering High School, the remodeling of the Casco Bay grade space and exits, paving at several buildings, and a new district phone system. The recently approved capital improvement programs for next year will include $4 million in important renovations, including many life safety projects at our middle schools and at Deering and Portland Highs. The Maine DOE has promised to issue their preliminary listing of major school construction projects later this month, and I'm still hopeful that our high school projects will be ranked high in that process. Our facilities assessment, as the board knows, tells us that we face nearly $120 million in high school upkeep projects in the next 20 years, so support from the state to address some of these needs would be very important. I will keep you posted. Finally, a week from today, Tuesday, June 12th, will be our school budget referendum. Our $110 million budget provides the resources we need to continue to provide the quality education that our students deserve and our community expects. Our budget, which is part of an overall $300 million City of Portland budget, will lead to an increase of 3.8% in the overall property tax. I hope that our families, community members, and all of Portland will come out to support this investment in the Portland Public Schools. Tonight, as part of the board's focus on educational issues, we are presenting an update on our people. I'm sorry, I just jumped ahead. That's further down in the agenda, so that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of May 15th, 2018. Is there a motion? Mr. Rodriguez, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. Are there any questions on the meeting minutes? Ms. Thompson?
I'm going to abstain, but I just, in reading the packet through, on the page where it talks about the resolution, consideration action to adopt a resolution on school boundary and school capacity review, it talks about the background summary. And then when you go down below, it says motion, Mr. Rodriguez moved and Mr. Belfont seconded to revise policy IKF graduation requirements. And speaking with Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Belfont, they did first and second it, but it shouldn't say to revise policy IKF graduation requirements. It should refer back to the resolution. So if we could just fix that, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other questions on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, any further board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of May 15th, 2018 with that revision, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ms. Thompson is abstaining, and with the students in the affirmative. And we do not have a report of the committees tonight. I'll go over the dates for committee meetings. We have June 13th at 6 o'clock p.m. for curriculum in the Portland District offices. Policy and Legislative Affairs, June 19th at 4:30 p.m. Operations, June 26th at 6 o'clock p.m. And Finance we have as August 14th at 6 o'clock p.m. in district offices. Moving into consent items. Would the superintendent please read the consent items?
Yes, Madam Chair, Lyseth Elementary School received the following donation: a cash donation to support the Lyseth Food Pantry from Portland Provident Association. Presumpscot Elementary School received the following donations: cash donations to support literacy at Presumpscot from Mark and Elizabeth Manduca, supplies for kindergarten expedition from Artist and Craftsman, school supplies donated by Mary Farnham, and books and supplies donated by St. Luke's Cathedral. Reiki Community School received a cash donation to support the Reiki Food Pantry from the Portland Provident Association. Riverton has an impressive array of gifts that were provided for their art gala, which is going to benefit their playground fund. And the gifts include gift cards from BJ Wholesale, from Amato's, from the Escape Room, from Maine Escape Games, Caravan Beads, Bayside Bowl, Rosemont Market and Bakery, Black Hat Cafe, the Treehouse Restaurant, and Bruno's Restaurant. They also received a basket of products and a tour of the factory from B&M Baked Beans, 4 passes and tickets from Portland Art Museum, Portland Stage, and Portland Sea Dogs, handmade mugs from Shannon Wong Pottery, and hand-painted dish towels from Pretty Flowers, and a 3-month membership to Garbage to Garden. And Lincoln Middle School received 4 Back to the Roots 3-gallon water garden tanks to be used to investigate life science standards. And Paths received the following donations: a 2001 Lexus RX 300 from Julie Bennett, a 2004 Honda Odyssey to be used for classroom training purposes from the Connectivity Group, and numerous parts from Portland Yacht Services. Thank you very much to all of our contributors.
Thank you. On to board focus on educational issues. We have achieving the people goal, and I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
All right, this is where I was going before. And tonight, as part of the board's focus on educational issues, we're presenting an update on our people goal. As you know, our people goal recognizes that we are only as good as our team. As such, we strive to attract, support, and retain the most diverse and talented group of educators, leaders, and other staff in the service of our achievement, whole student, and equity pursuits. The people goal is the foundation on which those other goals rest. Tonight, Executive Director for Human Resources, Barb Stoddard, will be talking about the 5 strategies associated with the goal, highlighting the significant work that she has been leading for the district in this area. But before she begins, I would like to recognize one more person, this time from our Human Resources Department, Holly Barnum. Oftentimes, the public doesn't understand how the work of our central office support staff makes a measurable difference. As you know, our equity goal calls for identifying barriers to equal access and removing them. Holly recently noticed that some of our employees struggled to be able to pay for the initial cost of fingerprinting. Anyone who works with children in a school setting, as you know, is required by law to be fingerprinted through a process approved by the Maine Department of Education. The cost, $70 for initial fingerprinting and processing, can be a serious challenge for new employees who are hired as temporary or as part-time on a part-time basis, generally for positions that are not particularly high-paying. In addition, some of the individuals that we hire are new to the USA and trying to make their way through here. So Holly took note of the situation, and then she took the initiative. She worked with Kate Snyder, Executive Director of the Portland Foundation, to secure initial funding from a small group of donors, which enabled us to eliminate the financial barrier facing a group of new employees. Kudos to Holly and to Kate for their efforts. This is a great example of how our Portland Public Schools people work each and every day to remove barriers to opportunity across the organization. So let's recognize Holly for her hard work.
Just for a second. Preempt, yes. No, I just wanted to say that I hope we can continue to remove these obstacles and support our community in every way that we can. We have an amazing community, and so many people have so much to offer us if we just can open the door. So I'm just hoping that this can just be the start. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Okay, Mark. It's all yours.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Barbara Stoddard. I'm the Director of Human Resources for the district. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share an update on our people goal tonight. I'm going to be reviewing and sharing information about work that has taken place this year in support of the people goal. I also have a few folks from across the district who are joining me this evening in the role of what we call voices from the field. These are staff members who are engaged in connecting our strategies to work in their buildings. So the Portland Promise, this should be a familiar sight to all of you. Tonight is the third update on the Promise goals. You've already heard about updates to whole student and equity goals this year. The people goal is focused on attracting, supporting, and retaining talented and diverse people. It has 5 strategies, including articulating our core values, strengthening people data systems and routines, building and implementing a comprehensive professional development strategy, building career pathways, and building and implementing a diversity recruitment strategy. Why people? So why did we include people in the Portland Promise? So of course we consider people goal to be the foundation of the Promise upon which all the other goals rest. Furthermore, the inclusion of the people goal publicly elevates and acknowledges the importance of people in our business. It also creates a more visible and intentional connection of our staff to the vision and the mission of the organization. How will we measure our outcomes? This year we are laying the foundation for baseline metrics to measure our progress. The first measure includes new tools that we've identified as a proxy for employee engagement. I'll be telling you about those in a few minutes. The second measure will be to track the increase in the number of staff who identify as people of color. Currently, that's just under 7% of all of our employees. The first strategy is the articulation of our core values and our unique identity to attract talent and strengthen our organizational culture. The most significant example is the Portland Promise itself. Through a district-wide process, the Promise was built with the input of many, many stakeholders, and the Promise is our brand. It is the foundation and an articulation of what we stand for as a district. Additional examples of how we articulate our core values are things like implementing recruiting practices that focus on diversity, revamping our new employee welcome to infuse more pieces of the core values in the Portland Promise. We're also updating our communication vehicles and programming that bring authenticity and life to our people goal. The second strategy is around data and strengthening our people data systems and routines. I know, data systems seem boring, right? Well, this is really critical work, and it's the backbone of our people data systems. It's also foundational to how we do our work more efficiently. In terms of data systems, we have started this work in earnest on multiple levels this year. We are transitioning to Tyler Technologies' Munis finance system in conjunction with the City of Portland. Our finance department and the city are shifting to Munis on July 1st. This shift is also allowing us to rethink our HR info system capabilities and our payroll functions. The full HR and payroll system will move to Munis on January 1st, 2019. As a first step in the HR transition, we have moved our open enrollment process online last month. We will be assessing Munis's system capacity and functionality for all of our HR functions that we need and don't currently have, things like tracking professional development, creating paperless processes, and things like that. We also view data and data routines as a lever to supporting our core values and our promise goals. As an example, we're using data from the New Teacher Project, or TNTP, surveys to understand our employees' satisfaction and engagement with their work. If you recall, we shared information about TNTP earlier this year in anticipation of all of our staff surveys that we were going to be doing. TNTP is a national nonprofit organization started by teachers in 1997 that is focused on ending educational inequality. They develop customized programs that enable education leaders to find, develop, and keep great teachers. TNTP is active in more than 30 cities and has partnered with over 1,600 schools nationwide since 2010. So we're going to take a closer look at those surveys now. So we're using TNTP data to understand our current state and to drive action planning towards improvement. This year, we implemented 2 different TNTP surveys. They have a national survey called the Instructional Culture Insight Survey, or INSIGHT, that was given to all of our classroom teachers this year. This diagnostic tool uses teacher feedback to help leaders understand and improve their school's instructional leadership practices in specific and concrete ways. INSIGHT was built on survey data from more than 130,000 teachers, and it is independently validated by leading research organizations. INSIGHT breaks down complex leadership practices and culture into discrete parts, providing school leaders with clarity needed to build workplace culture. INSIGHT also benchmarks results against a set of schools with strong practices, so schools can learn from exemplars. The tool itself consists of 12 different domains, and there are about 6 questions in each domain. Additionally, TNTP created a customized tool for all of our other district staff. Depending on the employee's role in the organization, staff answered questions within up to 4 to 11 different domains. All district staff were invited to complete the survey, and our response rate for baseline administration this year were really quite impressive. 98% of school leaders completed the survey, 82% of teachers, 77% of school support staff, 84% of central office staff, and 40% of our operations staff completed the survey. The 2 surveys included questions that we are using as proxies for setting our baseline measure of staff engagement. The INSIGHT survey has what's called the Instructional Culture Index, or the INSIGHT Index, and all classroom teachers are participated in that. Both surveys included a Net Promoter question, so all staff answered the Net Promoter question. So before we take a closer look at the metrics themselves, I just want to make a note of the crosswalk between the INSIGHT survey and the Portland Promise. You can see that the surveys cover a wide range of topics or domains that align to the promise itself quite well. What were some of the takeaways from the INSIGHT survey? First, a highlight from the INSIGHT survey is that teachers plan to leave Portland at lower rates than the national average. You can see from the green bar on the right that teachers plan to exit schools on average nationwide at a rate of 21%. Our rate in Portland is less than 10%. Very positive. So I talked about the INSIGHT Index a few minutes ago, and I wanted just to take a minute to show you what that is. The index is generated from the INSIGHT survey that is taken by all classroom teachers. The index is developed using answers from 3 specific questions within the survey. you can see from the slide that the 3 questions ask about a clearly articulated vision for successful instructional practices, that the vision is shared by all teachers, and that there is support for helping teachers to improve. The index is measured on a scale of 1 to 10, based on teachers who agree or strongly agree with a particular question. Again, it's a reliable measure to compare schools, and it's a holistic measure of strong school environment, which matters for improving student outcomes and retaining effective teachers. Another piece of high-level data from the first implementation of the survey is shown here. So the 2 columns on the right, those show our top quartile schools. Those are the top 4 schools out of the 18 buildings in the district. Our top quartile schools are tracking just above the national quartile schools with the index ratings that you can see up there. The 2 columns on the left show that we are below the national average in terms of all of the schools together. Our schools. So the quartile is all of the schools in the district, 18 buildings. The top quartile is the top 4 out of the 18 in Portland schools. Scoring on the index, on those 3 questions that are rolled into the index. So we're going to use data to begin our work in creating actionable plans to address our index scores. The second employee engagement metric is called the Net Promoter. Net Promoter was originally developed as a business tool to measure customer loyalty. We asked all staff to answer the following questions. How likely are you to recommend working at Portland Public Schools to a friend? The Net Promoter score is calculated by taking the percent of promoters, that's the people that are loyal and enthusiastic fans represented by the dark green 9 and 10 on the right-hand side, and subtracting the percent that are detractors, those that are dissatisfied or unhappy, and they're reflected in the orange 0 to 6 scores. The folks in the middle are called passives. They're generally supportive, but less enthusiastic. Those are the 7s and 8s. The Net Promoter score is on a scale from -100 to +100. And if you had a -100, everybody would be a detractor. And if you had a +100, everyone would be a promoter. A Net Promoter score higher than 0 is considered good, and a Net Promoter score of greater than 50 is considered excellent. While the Insight Index is considered a proxy for classroom practices, we are using the Net Promoter as a proxy for the system as a whole. District-wide, Portland Public Schools' Net Promoter score is 0. That means that we have an equal number of promoters and detractors. As expected, there are differences across employee groups. For instance, we had results ranging from building administrators who had a very strong score of 36, while DO's score, the district office, was a -13. We were not surprised to see that kind of a score after 2 very difficult budget years that resulted in impacts at district office. Overall, both of the metrics are going to help us identify where to focus our efforts. To give you a sense of how the TNTP surveys played out in the schools, you're going to hear a little bit more on the ground from Dr. Beverly Stevens, who's the principal at Ocean Avenue School. Dr. Corsi is going to share a little bit about the TNTP survey experience at the elementary level.
Thank you. I have a few examples of how this is being used across the district. First, at East End, the staff looked at their data from the survey and focused on how to improve the sections in which they scored the lowest. And they created goals and action plans. To create the action plan, they looked at the questions, and the staff had a dialogue about what they meant. They unpacked it, and they looked at what it would mean to improve in that particular area. So they would write it down, and they had a real dialogue about what does it mean, what does it look like, what would it look like if we were successful in this area, and taking a look at it by teacher, because it means something different to everyone. And I thought that was a great practice, and I think I'm going to actually use that at my school to figure out those really difficult ones that we had different answers on. And so then they're going to use this work and then to get very specific information and help them guide their PD for next year. At Peaks Island, they've already started to implement changes. They looked at their data, and they instituted two weekly procedures in their staff. First, Sirio does rounds each week and stays in the class for 5 or 10 minutes and leaves a detailed note regarding the best practices that she witnessed in the classroom. And second, they have a staff shout-out in their bulletin board in their teacher's room where they have each staff member's name posted, and then they have sticky notes of thanks and what they saw other people doing really well. So they're giving each other positive feedback in a public way right in their staff room. So they're enjoying acting on the data very quickly. At our school, I get really excited about the data pieces, and so I immediately shared it with our leadership team, and we talked about it quite a bit, and then they turned and shared it with their own teams, and before we talked about it as a large staff, so that everybody had an idea about what was being said before we came together as a large staff. And so when we came together as a large staff, we kind of hashed out a little bit about what we wanted to do, and we thought at first we wanted to impact the peer culture piece of it. But then we stepped back a little bit, and with some support from the people who actually do this survey, they said, let's take a look at feedback and observation and feedback, because that's a more foundational piece, and that would impact the peer culture piece of it. So that's what we did. We have started to take a look at what we could do to help give feedback and having teachers observe each other. There's so much good things happening in all the schools, and when we just start to step into each other's classrooms, we start to see that. We've had a goal around this. We've been, saying we want to get in each other's classrooms, we know everything's really good, and we keep saying we want to do it, but it doesn't happen unless it's kind of like hand over hand pulling and saying, oh, this is great stuff. But we've decided as a staff now that we're going to build procedures around this. How is it okay to do this? How do we enter each other's room? How are we going to systematically make sure it happens over and over again for all of the teachers in the school? The ed techs already have this great, they get to go in all the classrooms, and so when you hear them talk about what they see, teachers get excited too. So we're going to start that next year and be really clear about how this is going to happen and start a systematic piece with it. The other thing that we're really looking at is workload for staff. So that was a question where we scored lower, and we're looking at how do we help us work smarter and just not harder. So how do we help each other? How do we collaborate more? How do we help plan collectively so that we're lifting each other up? And how do we make this happen? Our staff is working really hard. We had a lot to celebrate in this survey as well. So taking the time to really look at what are we doing well and how do we make sure we keep doing that and not let it go in order to help something else out. So there's a lot going on. We're really excited about watching their growth over years for the targets that we connect with. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to then positively impact the workload piece and positively impact the whole range of observation and feedback. So that's going to be exciting for the second and third years of the survey. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stevens. The third strategy is professional development. The 4 Portland Promise goals overlap in the area of professional development, so it's really a comprehensive strategy. This was intentional in the design to strengthen our work district-wide. Both strategy and content are aligned to the promise. You've already heard about specific PD related to the whole child and equity in previous presentations. We're supporting this work in various ways. We are reviewing ways for us to streamline our offerings, tracking, and management of PD district-wide. It's a multifaceted effort. We are partnering across the district, in district office and in buildings, with HR, academic, and administrators working together, identifying ways for staff to access critical PD. Some examples of this work in action. We started with cultural responsiveness leadership training last summer at the superintendent's retreat. We brought in the Maine intercultural communication consultants, and ultimately we had 75 staff that participated in this training, and each person took what's called the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI, and received personalized feedback in a one-on-one meeting. We also formed a culturally responsive work group. The work group identified key learning targets and delivery methods for this work, and has also been a sounding board for the work this year. We're partnering with the Center for Equity Education to help build out our professional development structure and support our delivery efforts. We expect a visit from CEE again on June 26th. Another example of comprehensive professional PD, or professional development, took place during the Wednesday early release times for teachers. That PD has been focused on social emotional learning and equity literacy, and I think you have heard about this again during the whole student update. We're also planning to offer educational technicians professional development on June 21st. I do want to mention that a significant part of this work has been possible with the support of our equity specialist, Barrett Wilkinson, and I want to thank Barrett for all of their help. Finally, equity literacy was identified as an area of focus in all of our high schools this year. I'm going to invite Mallory Harr, an ESOL teacher at Casco Bay High School, to speak a little bit about the equity literacy work that has occurred at Casco Bay this year. And Mallory has also served on the District Cultural Responsiveness Working Group this year. That is a picture of us. The group went to a 2-day race and equity training together.
Right. Thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to speak a little bit to some of the work we've done at Casco Bay High School focusing on equity literacy, which is a term that we borrow from Neil Gorski. And this year, our principal, Derek Pierce, wisely made equity literacy a focus of our full faculty professional development time. And we had 3 guiding goals. We will become more self-aware about how our own background, personal history, and multifaceted identities shape and sometimes distort our perspective. 2, we will become more skilled at identifying and eradicating inequities and injustice in our school and broader world. And 3, we will become more skilled at helping our students be able to do the same. So in the 4 full faculty trainings that we did this year, and they were designed by interested staff, I was on the task force for this, we looked at a few different really important issues related to building our equity literacy. We used an online tool from Harvard to examine implicit bias and consider the ways in which our biases are embedded into our worldview, and how by building awareness we can begin to disentangle and hopefully counteract some of these biases. We did a privilege walk as a staff, broke into small groups for differentiated reading on white privilege and how it shapes white educators' approach to teaching. We celebrated the amazing new policy on serving transgender and gender expansive students by reading the policy together and then brainstorming specific ways we might implement this policy in the settings that are unique to Casco Bay High School. And then finally, and this was my favorite, we did critical friends groups around equity literacy conundrums. So faculty had a chance to submit something that had been bothering them, that they wanted to get their peers' feedback on, and we met in triads and talked through how can we be more responsive. And I will just say, in addition to a small group of faculty started an equity literacy reading group, and our parent association was kind enough to grant us some money for some books for that, and get together and read, and again, just continue the conversation about how can we be more thoughtful. And I will say, before I move on to what we do with students, is that impact of this has been really palpable because when you have more conversations about equity work is as important as it is challenging. I mean, sometimes it can be really difficult to go after these things, but because it's been systematized in our staff, I think the willingness and the sense of emotional trust that faculty have to kind of say, okay, help me out with this, I want to do better, has really, really palpably increased. And so that is something I've been really proud of and also has impacted my own teaching this year. And for that third goal about how we want to share this work with students, a major way we do this is through something we call Courageous Conversations, which we do once a month in CREW. CREW is our advisory structure. And the Courageous Conversation is the idea, it's a structured conversation that's about a topic that needs to be talked about. And it's pretty much student-led. Students raise the topics, they work with faculty to design some of the protocols, and then one representative from each crew gets trained to facilitate the conversation. So as a teacher, I'm a participant. I'm not the director of the conversation. And this year, the Courageous Conversations were very much in line with some of the equity focus. We too, students also considered privilege using a sort of privilege survey. We looked at how do you be a good ally to marginalized groups, how to be thoughtful using your language in ways that do not stigmatize those who suffer from mental health disorders or learning disabilities, and finally just more about what do I need my peers to know about me in order to feel like I belong. And so, as I conclude, I will say that the amount of time and focus that was given to equity literacy the equity literacy work might not have been super significant, but it had deep-rooted impact in terms of shaping our collegial conversations this year. And I'm very excited to continue doing it next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mallory. The fourth strategy are career pathways and retention. With the rollout of the Promise, we reinvigorated our efforts to increase focus on qualified internal candidates in our hiring pools. We're moving towards structures and routines that support and encourage staff to improve and increase their skills as they consider their next stage in their career and moves within the district. It's also now our practice to encourage internal staff to apply for positions that they're interested in and to interview all internal applicants who meet minimum qualifications. An example of this is an event we held on May 29th. We invited all staff of color who are not teachers to meet with the superintendent to discuss the importance of having increased diversity in our teacher workforce. We wanted to hear about their career aspirations, encourage them to consider teaching, and asking what the district can do to support them. We had about 15 employees attend the gathering, and we received some great feedback. To hear a little bit more about career pathways, we've asked Sue Ellen Santiago, who's the principal of Lincoln Middle School, to speak about her own experience in the district. Sue Ellen started as a sub when she graduated college. She was then hired as an ed tech. Her 20-year pathway has ultimately led her to her current position as principal. Sue Ellen will share her personal perspective about her own pathway and experience in the district.
Thank you. So being asked to talk to you about this was an opportunity for me to pause and reflect on a couple things. Feeling kind of old is one of them, and like, wow, this has been kind of a long journey, and where I started as a second grade student in Portland Public Schools myself, and a graduate from Portland High School, June 9th, 1993. So when I think about how I got to be where I am, I think the honest truth is I never in a million years would have said that this is what I would be doing with my life. Any bit of it, especially nothing to do with education. So when I found myself in education, following kind of my interests and passions, which I think is a good thing, each step from becoming, becoming an ed tech and going to be a teacher, and eventually being asked to join Leadership for Tomorrow's Schools by my former principal. Each one of those things was somebody saying to me that they saw something in me that they thought would be good for the next thing. It wasn't me recognizing that that's what I aspired to do. So I joked with Barb, you know, I'm living the Portland Public Schools dream here. But I think I've learned from this is how important it is to nurture within the people that are all around us, because this is all, you know, we're all about people. Really nurture the things that we see in others that they may not see in themselves. I may or may not have offered 3 of our 8th grade students a teaching job when they graduate college the other day after they presented professional development to my faculty at Lincoln. And when I, you know, meet new teachers who are interviewing for positions and may or may not be the right candidate for that position, try to take the time to really talk about, you know, the things that we see in them, as well as looking at people in that work in our building and saying, you know, have you ever considered, you know, a leadership role? And sometimes, like myself, when somebody says you would make a great leader, the typical response is, oh, I do not want to do that. You know, I don't want to go to the dark side, if you will. But I think what we're doing in this district is really recognizing that leadership takes on many forms, and it doesn't have to be that you're a principal or an assistant principal or working in the central office, but really finding ways that we can celebrate the successes and provide support through professional development, coaching, building people up when they don't feel like they have necessarily a lot to offer on any given day. So I'm appreciative of the support that I've received and try to do the same for others. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. It's an excellent model for us to follow. So the final strategy that I'm going to talk about are 2 areas where we've changed our structures and practices to increase staff diversity. That's the recruitment and hiring practices and Portland Public Schools Grow Your Own Teacher program, Teach Portland. So the research indicates that diversity in our educator workforce is really going to have a positive impact for all students. Studies also indicate that increased staff diversity benefits all of our staff. Any culturally diverse organizations tend to be 35% or more likely to outperform their competitors. So that is what we are seeking to achieve. So how are we doing it? We are activating our recruiting pipelines to increase the diversity of our candidate pools. We're using strategic partnerships with groups like Portland Adult Ed, the City of Portland's new Office of Economic Opportunity, USM's Urban Cohort, FedCap, the Diversity Hiring Coalition, and others. We know that we'll increase the likelihood of diverse candidates hired if we increase the numbers in our hiring pools. There was a study done by Harvard that is called the 2 in the pool effect. It found that when there was 1 minority or diverse candidate in a pool, that they had virtually no chance of being hired. If there were at least 2 diverse or minority candidates in the pool, the odds of hiring that person or a minority candidate were 194 times greater. Also under the recruiting and hiring practices are work that we're doing with our hiring teams. We're working to increase the diversity within the hiring teams. We're offering training and professional development for hiring managers and their teams. And we're taking a closer look at our interview processes. A piece of this work is focused on addressing bias in the hiring process. Again, we've suggested professional development and training that hiring managers and their teams can do that will help them examine their own biases. This is like taking the results of the IDI that we talked about earlier and reflecting on that, using Harvard's free online implicit bias test that Mallory just referred to. And finally, we're looking at our job descriptions more closely and seeing that they focus on specific skills and competencies for positions, as well as looking at the questions that we're asking during interviews to make sure that our interviews are really focused on job skills and mindsets, and that the tasks we're asking people to complete during interviews are very much related to success on the job. The second piece of the strategy is our Grow Your Own project, Teach Portland. I think everybody knows something about that. We had a very successful program last summer with 43 participants at 5 different schools. We had a stipend and a 3-credit USM course. Ultimately, 5 folks from that group accepted AmeriCorps positions within our buildings, and an additional 5 people were hired into the district. This spring, Portland schools hosted a USM undergraduate course at Deering High School, 1 day a week. 10 of our adult participants from last summer took that course right alongside a group of regular undergrad students from USM. We are planning in earnest for this summer. It will start next month. We've had interest from over 80 applicants, and I'm hoping that we will hire 60 participants to the program. We will be offering relevant PD and seminars to participants, and we're really excited to be able to offer the exceptionality course that's required for teachers to receive certification. We're going to be doing that in-house this year. We also plan to have a second seminar that's related to the teaching profession. So our final Voices from the Field speaker is Fernando Olimpio. Fernando was a Teach Portland participant last summer, and he's a current ed tech at King Middle School. For those of you who know Fernando, you would surely say that he embodies the district's core values of high expectations, creativity and innovation, individuality, community, and courage. Fernando?
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be invited and to be part of this important meeting. There is a Chinese proverb that says, in 10,000 miles, the most important step is the first steps. And I would say that Teach Portland is the first step to reach out the goal of diversity. I'm so thankful for take part of this team, and according to what we have been heard here, and I would say while I was at President Scott last year in summer school, I had very wonderful experience to be there and to share my experience from my country, from Africa, and also to exchange the experience with the teacher, my supervisor. That was wonderful. We had a group of students, probably 15 students. Most of them, they were ELL students. They didn't know how to read. They didn't know how to count numbers. They were struggling with subtractions and addictions. But hopefully, we had different strategy, and we helped them to understand how to do subtractions and additions. And because of this experience, hopefully, Portland Public School helped me finding job and get hired by King Middle School, where actually I am working as EdTech. It's lovely being at King Middle School. I think I have some colleagues right here that they know what I'm saying. At King Middle School, I do more than EdTech, because I love. We have a program which is called Newcomer Center. We have most of the students as life students, those students with interrupted I'm so sorry. That student with limited or interrupted education formal. And most of them, when they come at that center, they don't understand anything, and especially they have that difficult of language. And again, Mr. Olimpio, as they call me, is there to help them, to assist them in whatever is necessary. And I used to tell them, call me at any time, don't be shy, because this is my job, and I am here to support you. So I'm so happy to do this job, and I hope to get this opportunity again and again. And this upcoming summer, I'm so eager to come back again at President Scott and to find those colleagues and maybe those students, because I met them like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And hopefully one of them recognized me when I was talking to my ex-supervisor and says, Mr. Fernando. I said, wow, it's good to know me again. How do you know me? I said, wow, you were my teacher in summer school. I said, that's good. Thank you so much. And, well, I look forward to be, again, taking part at Teach Portland Professional and Development Seminar this summer. Again, thank you for this opportunity. Do not hesitate when you have anything like that, call me, and I'm here to attend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fernando. Okay, so what comes next as we continue our people focus? In terms of our professional development strategy, as I mentioned, the Center for Equity Education will be on site on June 26th. We are also developing a day-long equity literacy training on racism that will take place during the Superintendent's Leadership Retreat in August. You just heard about Teach Portland. We will be launching on July the 9th for 4 weeks, again with the hope of having 60 participants and 2 class offerings. And TNTP, we have baseline data from this year. Buildings and departments are implementing action plans based on the data from this year, and we look forward to our second round of the survey next January. Lastly, I just want to mention, as we have in some of these other presentations, that some of this work, much of this work on cultural competency, has been made possible through our grant funding partners. Sam L. Cohen, Bangor Savings, and Nellie Mae all supported this work this year. That is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions for anyone who has questions.
Questions, Roberto?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So, Barbara, thank you so much for that presentation. That's, it's always, this has been really good at getting the comprehensive plan goals set out and explained to us, especially with all the work that you guys have been doing. I guess just to get there from the end and then work our way back, just a couple of quick things that stood out. On the Teach Portland last year, where we had the 43 people and we ended up hiring 5, out of those 43, how many applications did we get?
Again, we had over 70 last year.
Okay, and the 43 fit in. And then this year you've had 80 already, and you're expecting to get 60 people in?
Correct.
Awesome. I forgot, I lost my thought, but there was something else I was going to ask about Teach Portland. That's really exciting. I guess, like Fernando was saying about it being like the first step, and you can see it full circle with his own experience, right? From Teach Portland to working with our life students over at King, and it really is exciting and shows how helpful it is, or how effective it is. I can't remember what else. I'll think again, because I think I've...
Anyone else? Tiana?
Thank you so much for your work. That was great to see. I just want to comment that hearing Ms. Har talk about the sort of professional development we've had at Casco Bay, I think that from a student perspective, that is absolutely ubiquitous in the student experience. I think that seeing our teachers on the same page and collaborating with equity and seeing books about equity on the shelves at the library and seeing these little pieces of teacher getting recognized at school meeting. And I think that as a student, for me, it is so powerful for me to see teachers of color succeeding and seeing people like Ms. Natarajan, who's stepping up and who is getting possibly recognized for a presidential award. And that means so much to me, especially as a student of color. As well, I'd like to say that for students, I think that seeing Mr. Olympio moving on up now is also reflected even at our level, as I'm seeing wonderful students like my friend Mona Abdelkader moving on to our programs here, where even at the high school level, you're really supporting internships for students to go into teaching and to encourage that field. And to seeing kids who maybe wouldn't have gone out for that opportunity, like we heard from the principal before about, like, you have to be recognized and say, I think you do great at this. And I love that we're making that first step and we're reaching out. And that is so exciting to me. And my one question would be that as a student and being here and being a little bit more involved in this work, I feel it really intimately, really viscerally. But I don't know if that's shared throughout my school with students really aware of the Portland Promise. And I think that feeling of support is there, but I hearing about branding, sometimes I wish there were more ways to publicly recognize the work we're doing for students so we can see, no, this is a campaign, this is something that this district thinks is important. And I think that that feeling is there, but sometimes I wish the branding was a little stronger so that kids know this is the Portland Promise. So, thank you so much.
Anyone else? Roberto?
Tiana kind of flicked my memory. So when we were at the Family Partnership Committee meeting and we talked about this, we also mentioned, and I'm gonna ask you to kind of talk about one of the points that we brought up that day. You know, the support, the extra support that we have to keep providing for our new, more diverse staff members. Like Tiana was saying, you know, we know that the support is there from us, but there's structures that need to be put in place. And I think you started to talk about it the other day during that committee. So I was hoping maybe you could just say a few things about that and the challenges that it presents when we have new staff members in an environment that they might not normally be in.
Yeah, so there are a number of things. One of the things, when we're trying to support staff, either current staff who want to move into teaching or when we want to hire new folks, it's a very labor-intensive process, very hands-on process, because each one has an individual pathway, depending on whether they have their transcripts with them from their country, whether they have the funding to have those translated and evaluated. So it's a long process. So I have staff in my office that will sit with people and look at that. Additionally, when we do hire people, we talk about diversity, but we often don't talk about inclusivity. And so thinking about ways to create support networks within the district for folks so they don't feel isolated when they come in. That was a conversation that we had when we had met with a group last week. People were very supportive of that idea, to be able to support each other, as well as for us to be able to show up and maybe deliver some professional development. They were saying we would love to have a time to get together and talk about interview skills. So we're thinking about a lot of the kind of work that needs to happen, the supports that we need to put in place to try to move this along. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you.
Anyone else? I would just say I really appreciate having this presentation. I think that of the 4 goals, the people goal, when we talk about it, we kind of talk about it as being the support for all the other 3. And it's probably the least apparent to us. You know, we always talk about programs and all the good stuff that's going on around our achievement and whole student goals, but to see the sort of administrative level work that's going on is really eye-opening, I think, for the board. So I appreciate it. There's obviously a lot of work that's gone into this, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just want to thank Barb in particular for your leadership in everything related to the people goal. Obviously, it is, you know, it is a part of the team, but any team needs somebody who is, you know, at the helm and, you know, thinking about it, breathing it every day, and you've done an amazing job of, you know, this is, today was a great testimony to the many different places within the organization that, that work around the people goal is happening, and, you know, being able to bring it together and explain it coherently is not an easy task. So thank you to you, thank you to all of the team that presented today. This is obviously, it is foundational work for the district. You know, everything from the not so sexy, you know, sort of infrastructure to all of the professional development to the, you know, to the work that we're doing around diversity hiring. These are the things that will transform the district. Knowing how we're doing and being able to track that, I think you're sharing the data, and, you know, clearly it tells us that there's a lot of room for us to get better, and, you know, that is, we knew that coming in, and now we actually have data around it, and, you know, going forward. So thank you very much for your leadership on this, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to old business. We have consideration and action to revise policy JICI, Athletic and Co-Curricular Activities Code of Conduct for middle and high school students. Is there a motion? Mr. Balfont, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. And would the superintendent like to speak to the motion?
Actually, Assistant Superintendent Crocker will speak to the motion.
Thank you, Superintendent Botana. I'd like to begin with a little bit of an overview of the work as it relates to both of the policies before you for action this evening. I'd like to remind us of some of the past work that has been done. So both of these policies have been thoroughly worked through and vetted by many of the district leaders in Portland who work most closely in these particular areas. Both were reviewed thoroughly by our legal counsel, and any adjustments that were suggested obviously were incorporated. And then we had a workshop recently with the board in order to present and provide opportunity to discuss these policies closely with the people who were most involved in creating them. And I would thank you for your engagement during that particular workshop. And I thank you in advance for your support of these important policies that are especially timely now, I think, for our district. I'd like to start, first of all, with policy JICI, a little specific background for that one. Many months of intense work by all of the right people that know this the best and brought their best thinking. So all of the high school principals, all of the middle school principals, all of the high school ADs, and all of the middle school ADs at length. And then review, obviously, by the policy committee that supported and passed these policies, bringing them to your consideration. And I would point out, especially with JICI here, that this policy is for immediate use now because, you know, we think about how we're completing the 17-18 school year. Well, we are knocking on the door of starting the co-curricular year for 2018-2019. And JICI will be printed in school handbooks and will be shared with parents and athletes within just a few weeks. So with that having been said, I'd like to give you specific the background summary here for JICI, if I may. So during the 2016-17 school year, a number of policies were revised to come into alignment with proficiency-based practices at both the middle and high school levels. The original changes made to policy JICI and brought before the Board of Education contained some inaccuracies, so the board took action to return to past practice for 1 year, this past school year, in order to allow the time and effort necessary to more carefully review and revise the policy. This year, as I said, a large group of educators composed of the high school principals, middle school principals, high school athletic administrators, and middle school athletic directors, administrators, and district administrators worked over the course of many months to incorporate the needed changes. And so I would ask for your support of this policy so that we can move forward in supporting all of our students who participate in our co-curricular activities.
Are there any questions on the motion? Ms. Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question on academic eligibility under the high school on number 1, where it talks about Portland High and Casco Bay High School students must take and be making adequate progress to learning standards for 5 academic classes per semester. And I'm just wondering, we've encouraged a lot of the students to take college classes, whether SMCC or USM, and I know those count as part of their schedule, but from personal experience, when my child was a senior at Casco, she only needed English to graduate. And so she took 2 or 3 classes in the university level, but she still didn't get to the 5. She didn't play field hockey that year, but she would have been ineligible based upon this, so she has her credit. She's taking a load at the college. And so I guess my concern becomes for this is that it seems very hard fast, or I don't know if that's the right word, but in that if a student is achieving well, and at that point, similar to my child or other students, that it almost seems like we're penalizing them to have to take 5. And I think if they reach a certain point in their career at high school and they've done everything they can do, then why are we still making them take 5 classes? They can go over to university, take a couple classes, they can go to some CC, but you still can't get to that 5. And so that's one of my concerns, that we are then penalizing those students that have worked really hard and gotten to where they are. It just, to me, that's my concerns when we specifically say 5 academic classes per semester. I know it also keeps you off the honor roll, which also was a challenge again, personally, for my student, my child, have the grades to be on the honor roll, but was not allowed to be on the honor roll because she wasn't carrying 5 classes. So, yeah, I just get concerned when it's more of a penalty to the students, so.
Is there...
I mean, I think, those are important issues. Those are not changes in the policy, so that was existing in the previous policy, so that has not been changed. I'm not sure exactly what the practice is around that. I don't know, Mrs. Crocker, if you know, is that factual, that if you aren't taking the 5 classes, you are not eligible to compete?
So I believe it's true. It was your daughter's experience, and you've brought this up before, and I think it's a very valid concern. It isn't addressed specifically here, but I understand why you would bring it up, and I believe we should bring it forward as a concern and for consideration going forward. That though under normal circumstance, it probably makes sense for students to take 5 classes and to have that, but for there to be some kind of an opportunity for a waiver or a consideration of, what indeed makes sense on a student-by-student basis.
Ms. Claytor?
I just had a question. Tiana and I
Just use the mic.
I can set them up.
It was in the board packet that...
Tiana?
Go ahead.
So I guess my question to the superintendent and assistant superintendent then is if you would recommend some sort of language that we could add so we don't hold this up to your point of people being able to participate in summer sports coming right up and so on and so forth, that if we could put some sort of under the 2 at the end, based, again, educational terminology that you think is best to address that issue and take it on a case-by-case basis, should that be a situation for a student. And I think Ms. Davis wants to say something too.
Yep, I have Ms. Davis and then Mr. Balfonts. I don't know if you wanted to respond to that or take a minute to think about it.
I would not want to make a recommendation on the fly. I would want to bring that back to the committee and, bring back a change in the policy somewhere down the road if that is, I have not been as close to this process, but clearly, lots of eyes have been on this policy. The policy committee has reviewed it and, others, and that has not been raised as an issue. So I don't know if it's just a very, very specific issue that you've encountered and that, but it hasn't been raised as a, sort of an issue that, that athletic directors, for example, would be dealing with on a regular basis. So
I just wanted to mention that when I was on the policy committee last year, when it came forward and I was on the policy committee, I did bring it up at that time, and at the time that we sent it back to them, that was also one of my comments at the time. And so, I wasn't on the policy committee this year, but it was discussed last year when we sent it back.
Okay. We got Ms. Davis, Mr. Balfonts, Ms. Seeliger, and then Mr. Atkinson.
And I'm going to echo Ms. Thompson's experience because this would have impacted my son the same way. He finished his junior year of high school needing only English to graduate. He spent most of his senior year abroad. And so I doubt that those, as an AFS student, as an exchange student in Hungary, I don't think those classes would have counted. He came back, and specifically it was very important to him to play lacrosse. He did. So however, whether this was long enough ago that this wasn't in there at that point, but I think that's not a unique experience for students who may have, gotten done basically with the required courses, and that taking courses for the sake of taking courses does not seem to me to be something that I'm comfortable with. So I think this does need more work. I'm sorry that it's come to us without that having been highlighted, because I remember that Ms. Thompson did highlight it then. But her daughter's experience was not a one-off. My son had the same experience, and given this policy, would have been prohibited from playing lacrosse, which would have been
And we just had a
very
sidebar
difficult.
that it may also be tied to MPA requirements. So that could be why that has not been changed, so.
And just to clarify too, if we pass this policy tonight, if we don't pass this policy tonight, it's still in there. It's still in our existing policy, right? So either way,
That's correct.
I suppose we could make an amendment tonight.
Right.
On the fly with regards to language. If we have to pass it tonight to get it moving, then I think we all can come up with something here.
But again, I would just want to caution against making an abrupt change that then could potentially be out of compliance with MPA policy. So I don't feel prepared to say that is, okay to do. And so again, I'm thinking that this has been reviewed by attorneys and has been, reviewed by a large number of people over the past year, and I would be concerned about making an abrupt addition to this that would, that hasn't been vetted carefully.
Mr. Balfons.
I think the concerns may be addressed in subparagraph 5 if we look down a bit, depending on how terms are defined. And the subparagraph 5 says, for students attending other educational alternative programming, the student meets equivalent academic standards as those established for regular enrolled students participating in the activity and provides evidence that the academic standards are being met. So depending on how those are defined, that may address Sarah's concerns.
That's 4.
Ms. Seeliger?
I would like to echo what Mr. Balfons just said about the part in the policy. We had a lot of collaboration with principals, athletic teachers to create alignment with conduct across the district. And I'm not so sure that it's completely hard that we wouldn't be able to work for students who have already completed the necessary requirements to do sports. Maybe that was a different situation with Board Member Thompson, but as chair of the policy committee, I'm willing to go back and add that language in if you feel that that's really necessary, and if we consult with our lawyers as well, that's compliant with the state regulations. I'd be okay with that. Or you could put forward an amendment tonight if you would so like. So, thank you.
So we're technically still on questions, but I feel we're moving a little bit into discussion here. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll open it up to public comment. Seeing none, I'll open it up to public comment on the motion. Seeing no public comment, we can return to board debate. Ms. Thompson.
So outside of that, there was a part, I was just going over it with Mr. On number 1, it's on the second line, it says, a student is considered in good standing if he, she is not subject, and I'd like to amend that to say they are. And then
Where are you?
number 1, where it says he, she, we've gotten rid of he, she, and changed that to they are. And then the same on number 6, where it says he or she, if we could change that to they as well. And those are the only 2 places I could find where it said he, she, referring to a student. There is a he, she for designee on the administrator level, and I suppose we could change that too, but this refers to the students, and we have a policy now that does away with that. So I just want to make those amendments to say they.
So that's an amendment offered by Ms. Thompson. Is there a second? Mr. Rodriguez? So now we're on to the amendment. Is there any questions about the amendment? Seeing none, any public comment on the amendment? Seeing none, any further discussion on the amendment?
I just want to be clear, are you suggesting, and I think we ended up there, that all he, she language, no matter to whom it refers, be changed to inclusive language? Okay, thank you.
And that's consistent with what we've been trying to do going forward in all of our policies. I suspect these are just a couple of places where it was missed, so. Unless there's other further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of changing the language to they from he, she? Please indicate. It is unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. And we're back on to the main motion. Any further discussion? Mr. Balfons.
This is definitely minor. Someone may be able to go back and clean it up later, but just looking at how things are identified, numbered, if we start on page 2 with academic eligibility, going down to under high school 1, 2, and then under 2 you have, instead of what should be A, B, C, it's numbers. And then if you look down, I think that'd make it consistent if we change that, but just minor things.
So that's an amendment to make the numbering consistent by Mr. Balfons. Is there a second? Ms. Seeliger? Any questions on the amendment? And so is your amendment, it's not necessarily specific, it's just to make the...
Yeah, just make the paragraphs, I don't know, orderly or consistent.
Consistent in numbering. Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this amendment? Seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of making the numbering consistent, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Ms. Thompson and then Mr. Rodriguez.
So Googling the Maine Principals Association student eligibility, there is a part that says, when it talks about student eligibility, and that says who has completed and passed work in the equivalent of 4 full-time subjects with credit towards graduation in the most recently completed quarter or equivalent. So it does notate 4 and passing, and it goes on and on about what passing is, so on and so forth. But under student eligibility, there is nothing that says 5. There is a reference to a 4.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of things. As part of the review of this policy, some of the other policies that are referenced in here are kind of, I went back and looked at them, and I was wondering if within the process whether they were reviewed as well, and I guess I find out they weren't. So I just wanted to point out that from the previous version of this policy, the tobacco and drug offenses had their own section on how they would have been disciplined, and now we're being told to refer to the district-wide policy on those things. And even though those were recently reviewed, I think one of them was 2015, the other one 2014, there's some language and there's some things in those policies that in my opinion at least, they don't seem to reflect some of the same philosophy that our comprehensive plan probably intends to put in place. So I was hoping maybe, not consequent to this, but in the near future, we can bring those policies up through the policy committee and review them, just to kind of put out there some of the things that I'm talking about. It needs to be cleaned up. There's a couple of like spelling stuff, which I won't get into, but one of the things that stood out to me on the tobacco use was if a staff member were in violation of the policy, the initial offense reaction would be to have a verbal I guess, consult. And if the same would be the case for an elementary school student, the first offense results in a 3-day suspension. So I thought maybe that'd be at least worth a discussion, especially as we're discussing equity and some of the other things. Not to say that would be changed, but it's just something that stood out to me. And so just wanted to bring that out. And also, I guess I should have brought this in the questions. One of the biggest changes also from the original draft is that they removed the house from the high school requirements. I thought that was important to highlight because when we first were trying to pass this last time, there was a lot of attention to that and how that would have been a barrier to a lot of students. And clearly the reaction from leadership was that that should not be included in this policy. So I think it's worth pointing that out because, again, that was a big piece last time around. That's it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Ms. Thompson?
So I guess if we're going to just make an amendment, and we have to be in line with MPA guidelines, that I would like to make an amendment on section academic eligibility under high school, number 1, change that from 5 to 4 to match MPA guidelines.
Is there a second? Mr. Rodriguez? Any questions, Ms. Davis?
How does the MPA impact, I think it was one that said that they needed 3. I'm going back.
Yeah. So our 2 high schools, Portland and Deering, have different schedules. And so taking a full course of study ends up being a different number at each of the schools. And my assumption regarding the MPA guideline policy is that they were aiming at something that seemed to be about what high schools throughout the state would be using, and the idea being a full load at what the high school would be.
Ms. Thompson?
So I think to that point, then, if Portland High School and Casco Bay High School are traditional in the sense of they mirror each other somewhat, and Deering has a different, the 3x3 or whatever we're calling it these days, 4x4. So this sounds like that the Portland and Casco can be changed to 4 full-times because it says who has completed and passed work in the equivalent of, to your point, Assistant Superintendent, the equivalent of 4 full-time subjects with credit toward graduation in the most recently completed quarter or equivalent. But it starts out right at the beginning. It does specify the 4, but then also it says who meets the eligibility rules established by the local school authorities. So we also have eligibility that are by the local authorities, but it is explicit here about equivalent to 4. So however we figured this out to be, Portland High School is pretty traditional, so I would think 4 is 4.
Ms. Uri?
I'm not sure if this is the right time for this, but just a question to Ms. Thompson about the amendment. Would it be better suited as maybe a caveat, like further down, as in like what Ms. Crocker was referring to, as in maybe a waiver that you could fill out, rather than adjusting the entire part above that has already been agreed with principals and through process, but maybe passing it now and then later, like revising it then, or? No.
My only response to that would be this has to go out to the students and their families to be eligible for sports for the summer. And so if we put it out and we worry about it later, then we're putting out something, and it's currently standing like this, to Chair Tavoro's point, and this is the time for us to make the change. And or if we want to make a caveat there to the point of saying, in the instance of students that are traveling abroad or have met their academic requirements, so on and so forth, because we also, as a district and as a state, and I think as a nation, is we're encouraging students to move at their own pace. And so there may be some students that finish school a lot earlier. And so, again, I'm more concerned about the 5 academic classes per semester. And if we can put a caveat in there, fine, then 5, but otherwise, I guess we have to go to the minimum of what the MPA says, then I would put in the wording of equivalent, just like they say, of 4 full-time subjects, so equivalent.
So I will say again that I am very concerned about changing the policy on the fly without fully understanding the repercussions. I do think that Mr. Balfont's point about Section 5, which talks about equivalent, academic standards for other programs, is the caveat that we need to be able to operationalize what Member Thompson is concerned about. I believe that we would be able to achieve that by, a liberal interpretation of number 5. So rather than trying to make a change on the fly for a policy that's been reviewed by a, very large number of people for a very long period of time, I would really ask that you let us go back, consult, and make sure that that would achieve it. And if not, then I can assure you that, we understand the principle of what you've articulated and would be happy to have a full discussion with the staff, with the athletic directors, with the principals, and then bring it to the policy committee and have a conversation with the policy committee if that were necessary. I'm just, I'm really reluctant to try to make a policy change on the fly for something that has been worked on for so long by so many people who are not here today to be able to answer those questions.
Ms. Thompson?
Completely hear you about the liberal thing, but I think it's interpretation then. And here we're being very specific about the number of classes. So even if that talks about programming, and it depends on how you define programming, I wouldn't call a subject a program. I would think of paths potentially as a program, and now it's a, so to me programming is depending on how you define it. And so we're going to come down to interpretation because, again, we get to academic eligibility and it's very specific. So I guess if we can't change it this evening and there isn't support for it, then I just won't vote for it. But I certainly hear your point, Superintendent Botana. But if there's any other avenue to consult and bring this back to the board at the next meeting, I think we still make the deadline for booklets and all of the other stuff. So I'm fine with bringing it back. But until we have, I guess I'll vote no.
I would prefer that we do that we just pull it from tonight and bring it back to the meeting on the 19th.
And there is time for that? So we currently have an amendment on the table.
I'll withdraw the amendment if we're going to pull it from the table and bring it back on the 19th. I'm fine with that. Thank you.
And is that okay with the amendment seconder? Yes. Okay. Okay. So at this point, I would entertain a motion for a postponement. Ms. Thompson, seconded by Ms. Davis. Any questions? Ms. Seeliger? Was it? Oh, okay. Any public comment on the postponement? Seeing none, any discussion on postponement? Mr. Atkinson.
I guess I'm going to vote against postponing. I think we should just move forward and pass this as is and come back to it later, but it seems like that's not where the energy in the room is. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I would prefer to get this done and move forward from here.
Mr. Balfons and then Ms. Davis.
I'm also against postponement. I'm in favor of voting on it tonight.
Ms. Davis.
Looking quickly at at least the model policy from the MPA on eligibility for sports, JJIC, it would appear that they have some latitude in here, and that it is not about the number of courses, that the district is able to complete a lower or higher number of courses or learning experiences other than the minimum 5 specified above. I think there may be some flexibility in the MPA. I think it makes sense for us to look so that we don't set students up to be challenged. It would be nothing worse than to have made your entire academic plan and then discover that because you're a really good player, somebody challenges your right to play at the last minute. That would be very difficult for the student and the family. And I think that we may be able to craft something that is a little more proficiency-based and reflects the fact that students move through their high school education at increasingly differentiated ways, and that their learning experience may encompass different things than taking a set number of courses at the high school, which is the way this is written. And I think that we need to have a more holistic approach, a more whole student approach to looking at how this is crafted so that we don't inadvertently set students up to be excluded from co-curricular participation because they either have accelerated their academic career or are doing things that are perhaps atypical educational experiences, such as study abroad or study at the college level. I think we need to have a little more inclusive language in this piece so that, because it does sound as though perhaps the district can drive what the standard is, and so I would urge the district to take that role, because we have 3 high schools with different approaches to education, and within that we have students who are increasingly going to craft their own educational pathway through high school. And that should not exclude them from participation in sports because they are not taking a standard 5 or 3 courses at a particular high school. So I'm in favor of postponement.
Mr. Rodriguez and then Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I guess if there's no negative effect to postponing it, I think we still meet the timeline or the deadline to print out the booklets. And it seems to be one specific thing that we're asking to look back on. And if it can be accomplished before the following meeting, I think I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't think that we're going to look to make any other substantial changes to the policy, but just to make sure that either number 5 in the eligibility section covers the concerns, or if something a little bit more dynamic needs to be put in. So I think I'm okay just postponing until next meeting.
Ms. Thompson?
I promise. I was just going to say to maybe some of our newer members that in past practice and being on the board for 12 years, when we have to spend this much time debating a policy and trying to make things on the fly, to the superintendent's point, and we have time, the better thing is to send it back for the revision, to bring it back to the board, opposed to just passing it for the sake of passing it. So that would be my advice, is that when we spend too much time on something, then we're not progressing and making good work. So thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Sorry, I'm really not putting my thoughts together today. I just wanted to make a point to what Ms. Davis said, just to highlight why it might be important to take the extra minute and go through this. And I might be wrong in saying this, if the MPA decides to appeal, if anybody decides to appeal the eligibility of a student, and it turns out that that student is not eligible to participate, there's a penalty not just to the student, but potentially either to the team or whatever activity. So the consequences, it trickles down quite severely. So I think being sure that we're not putting kids in a position where they could be challenged for the eligibility, it's quite important. And if we have the time to do it, we should do it. Thank you.
Ms. Plater.
Thank you. I think it's important that as we do look into the MPA rules and to possibly amending this to be more inclusive of unusual circumstances, that we also keep in mind that if we do make the requirement for classes lower, if we say it's 3 instead of 5 or whatever that is, in a general sense, that we risk I think, going around something that this policy is supposed to do, which is make sure that student athletes are mainly focused on their student career, that they're still academically involved. And if we lower the academic requirements for the general population, I think we would risk some kids becoming more involved or less involved in school in a way that would be really detrimental to the main goals of this policy.
I guess I don't really have strong feelings on postponement one way or the other. I would be ready to pass this policy tonight myself. I think it's been around and around, and it's had a lot of eyes on it and a lot of work that have gone into it, particularly the people who are most equipped to be able to give us guidance on this policy. And as I'm reading that section that Mr. Balfont's pointed to, it seems to me that that's exactly what it does, is gives leeway for us to be able to make adjustments for students that are taking equivalent standards. So to me, postponement allows us to clarify that, essentially. I wouldn't really want to see us making too many adjustments on the fly. Just because I worry that we get outside of the expertise and guidance that we've been given on this. So I think with that we can postpone it tonight, given the fact that we have time. So, unless there's any other discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of postponing to the next meeting, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? It's Mr. Atkinson, Mr. Balfont, and the students. And so that's 4. We need...
And Holly just...
Oh, Holly, we need your vote.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We're tied. Well, we're not tied, but we don't have a majority. Oh, okay. Right, but so the quorum counted, 4 counted towards the quorum. Okay. Got it. Yeah, it's been, so.
But,
would you like to vote, Holly? Okay. 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 Okay, so now we have consideration and action to adopt a policy, commercial microwave communication installations. Is there a motion? Ms. Seeliger, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. And would the superintendent like to speak to this motion?
Mrs. Crocker is going to speak to the motion.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll give this one a try. And we have experts in the room with us this evening, and I am especially thankful for your presence, especially as it's gotten to be a late hour. The commercial microwave communication installation policy, cell tower on top of Deering High School. The Portland Public Schools is currently under contract with the cellular phone provider to provide space on the roof of Deering High School for cell tower installation. DHS staff has expressed concerns and has worked on this over several years related to the health and safety of cell towers. Over the course of this spring especially, the policy committee, together with legal counsel and other stakeholders, developed a policy to prevent proliferation of cell towers on school district property without careful consideration of potential health and safety concerns. So this would basically forbid future contracts to either continue the existing cell phone tower or to expand.
Are there any questions on the motion? Ms. Thompson.
I just have a clarifying question. When I was on the board and we went into this with Dr. Morse as our superintendent and the city manager at that time, the way the contract had to be was because we don't technically own our buildings, that it was a joint contract with the city. And so my question is, can we pass a policy when we don't own the buildings? And what about the city of Portland? When we had to go into a contract, they had to sign with us. If they weren't in favor of doing it, then we couldn't have done that contract. So can we say no more without the city signing off? And we have clarification on that?
So I would say yes. We have involved the city with this. The city does not have cell towers on their buildings. They know that we're going through this, and this policy was vetted and significant adjustments were made to it by Drummond Woodsum in order to make sure that we were in strong legal standing.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I would open it up to public comment.
So good evening. Sue Olafson, President of the Portland Education Association. And as Ms. Crocker said, this journey began 3 years ago with 90 concerned Deering High School staff who signed a petition with their concerns about the health and safety about the cell tower that was located on the 3rd floor right above the biology lab. It's been a long journey. We've looked into various aspects of this, the health and safety concerns, but also that having these 20-year contracts is a long-term dedication of district property or city-owned property that isn't always in the best interest of the schools. It binds future boards from doing different things with property. And so I am very appreciative that the policy committee has put together a proposed policy that they've taken time to well consider and have it run by your legal counsel. And I hope that there's a positive vote this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? No? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Is there any board discussion? No? Well, I would just say I am supportive of this policy. I kind of was not heavily involved, but I did drop by the policy committee on one of their meetings when they were dealing with this issue. And of course, I followed all the comments that we received from teachers over the last 3 years. I think this is generally just a good idea, and we don't get a whole lot for this contract. It makes sense that we honor this policy and move forward with it. With that, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of adopting a policy, commercial microwave communication installations, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students in the affirmative. And we're on to new business. We have a first read to revise policy JLF, child abuse awareness and prevention training for our school employees. We have no personnel items this evening.
We also have a first read on the memorandum of understanding for the Greater Sebago Educational Alliance.
First read on regionalization MOU. Sorry, I missed that. I'm
no problem.
Rusty after 2 weeks off. Jeez.
And we are having a workshop after. It should be brief, but just to talk through key issues with that.
There are no personnel items, and where it is before the hour of 10 o'clock, we would open it up to public comment on any items not on this evening's agenda. Seeing no public comment, I will close public comment and call for a motion for adjournment. Mr. Balfont, seconded by Ms. Thompson. All those in favor? Ms. Davis? It's unanimous with the students in the affirmative. And we're adjourned, and we are moving into our workshop on that MOU.